Two.
Hey everyone, good evening. Welcome to the Sage Dragon Book Show. I'm your host, Shaquana. I'm coming to you a different time. We're going at 5 o'clock. We usually air Saturdays at 11 a.m., and I try to be very consistent with that, but life be lifing. So we had some things going on this week. You all know how it is family, household stuff. And I also work full time in corporate America. So, but I love creating this content on great books and welcome you all to some deep conversation. I hope you all, wherever you are safe and well. It's Saturday, November 8th, 2025. And for any of you watching in the future, if you are new to my show, I have a unique corner in the digital space because I am a book content creator and I do book reviews and I turn them into discussion points. So if this is something that you think you would like, please sign, not really sign up, but sign on to my show. I have a YouTube page, Sage Dragon Books. I have a Facebook. I have to work on my Instagram. I post all the books I'm reading as stories, but I don't have that much of a footprint. But that's okay. It's a work in progress. I started this back in April, and I have to count to see how many episodes I've done and the milestone there. But my first book was Michelle Obama's The Light We Carry, and I read vastly. I do series. I like to do themes and so forth. So I had been doing a lot of books on activism, and today's episode, it's a little bit of a shift. It's not an activism book, but I got two books that I guess I just basically will say, how the heck did we get here? How did we get here? And what I mean by that is the state of women in pop culture and the way that we're depicted, the messaging that girls and women are getting, have gotten over the past 20 years. The book that I am going to be reviewing today, it's called Girl on Girl: How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves. It's by Sophia Gilbert. It gets into a lot of really important themes and questions that I hope, we'll be talking about in the years to come. We need to talk about this stuff. And I'm also going to do a review of a book that was near and dear to me, and connected to this book because it gets into, as the episode unfolds, you'll understand why I wanted to do No Disrespect by Sister Soldier, which came out way back in the 90s. So we're going to get into some great discussion. All right, but first, I always do a book news segment where I like to talk about hot book news of the week. So this week, I learned that Jane Kennedy just unveiled her new memoir, the legendary Jane Kennedy. And I've got a clip here where she's going to talk about her exciting new book. So, can we show that, please?
Coming up.
All right. Thank you, producer.
excitement. We're back now with the trailblazing Jane Kennedy, the first black woman to win Miss Ohio, first black woman broadcaster on a live nationally broadcast NFL pregame show. Remember, her career has inspired many, myself included, and her new memoir, Plain Jane, tells the story of the triumphs and challenges she went through. Please, a big GMA welcome to the one and only Jane Kennedy. Honey, I remember we talked a couple of years ago, and you said, I've written this memoir. I don't have a publisher. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And we gave you a big old shout out on GMA.
You did.
And then what happened?
What a surprise what happened. I didn't think you were going to do that. I thought you were going to call me back and say, we have some ideas. Next morning, everybody's blowing up my phone. And they're saying, turn on Good Morning America, turn on Robert. She's shouting you out. And I couldn't believe it. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, because that was the beginning of this journey.
And you know what? I wasn't doing you any favor. It's so deserving. So deserving and so worthy of this. Just tell us how this all came about, because here you are, Miss Ohio, legendary career in broadcasting, an actress and all that, and then you name your Plain Jane. You're anything but a plain Jane. Talk about the meaning behind that.
Well, Plain Jane is just because that's who I am. I'm a simple person. I have dreams like everyone else. I have family like everyone else. I have memories. I go back to my childhood when I started thinking about, how my family raised me. And I always promised myself when I went to Hollywood that I would never be anything other than what they raised me to be. So it was always important to me to stay true to myself. There were plenty of opportunities to go the other way, but I never wanted to do that. And so when I came to a title for the book, it just came so simply, Plain Jane. And I figured, well, through all the iterations, they're going to change the title of the book anyway. They never did.
They loved it.
From day one, everybody loved it.
I know, and I'm going to tell you, I read it cover to cover.
Yay! So I'm really excited about that book. I'm going to get it as another Black woman who has dreams, who also loves to invest in the dreams of others. I've raised a daughter who's pursuing her dreams of being a performing artist, and she's also a pageant girl like Jane Kennedy was. So I can't wait to read it and perhaps feature it in a future show. So congratulations to the legendary Jane Kennedy, and I hope the book is very successful. In other book news, there is a new book by one of my faves, Nikki Giovanni, and a voice that I got this from Book Trib, which provides like a lot of information on book news. And it says Nikki Giovanni's The New Book was her final book, unless a later comprehensive compilation of her many works of prose, poetry, and children's books is published. And this is her final one. So it's poems, it's letters, blurbs, and things. So I bet you it's amazing. So let's get into today's books. So author profile. The first book that I'm reviewing is called Girl on Girl: How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves. It's by Sophie Gilbert. She's a staff writer at Atlantic. She writes a lot about pop culture, television, film, and books. So very knowledgeable in this space. And she was a finalist for the 2022 Pulitzer Prize in criticism, and she's got a strong background in journalism. So I got a couple of images that I'm going to show that capture the essence of what this book is providing in an analysis. So here's an image here. You've got a picture of an article between Cardi B, and she's in this feud with Nicki Minaj, and it's gotten pretty nasty. They're coming for each other's children. There's another visual of the pleasure of their pain, why the punishment and humiliation of reality TV contestants provide such a satisfying and deep pleasure. And that references a reality show that the book also talked about that came out and was like all of these really successful, accomplished women that had to like relegate themselves to competing for to marry a man they had never even seen. How foolish is that? These doctors, accountants, they don't went to college and all of that, and this is what they felt like they needed to do. There's also an article that talks about plastic surgery, the surge of it in the 2000, 115% increase in procedures. How did we get here? I got another set of slides I want to show. Um, Anita Hill waiting for Joe Biden's apology in her 30-year fight against gender. And here is another image of some of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. How did we get here? Two women in the last, 10 years ran for office. Neither one of them won. There are so many views and opinions on their campaigns and the reasons why they lost. And even if, there's legitimate criticisms, absolutely, with both women, but can you deny the fact that for the particular role they applied for, were they not qualified? How did we get here? Here's another couple of images. 10 years ago, this article talked about the launch of Kim Kardashian's empire. It all started with a sex tape into a business empire. And, you fast forward, that article was written 2017. I think it's 2017, because it's going back 10 years. And then this article in 2023, from 2007 to 2023, that launch led in the way leading into the way. Kim Kardashian named one of Fortune's most powerful women. She says people have underestimated her, and that's what keeps her going. How do we get here? And so I'm going to show a little clip that also provides an overview of this book. It's called Girl Power and Faux Feminism of the 90s. And it's from Bossed Up. So if our producer can play that, the first couple of minutes, it's going to play through 2 minutes and 41 seconds. And then if you want to see more of it, it's on YouTube. You just have to type in, if you type in this book, it'll come up. It's not a lot on this book yet, which is why I'm also trying to promote it. So producer, can we play that clip, please?
Yeah, I'm getting it ready now.
Okay.
And where that leaves us today is Sophie Gilbert. Sophie, welcome to the Bossed Up podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I am delighted to have you. I'm no pop culture expert myself, but having read some of your book, Girl on Girl, I feel like I'm talking to someone with a PhD in 90s and aughts culture. So first of all, congratulations on the new release. It's amazing.
Thank you. It did feel a little bit like, I shouldn't say this because people actually do get PhDs in 90s and aughts culture, and they're very, very clever, and they have done a lot of research. But it did feel the process of reading and watching and revisiting was quite intense for this book. So thank you.
Yeah, it shows in the work. So one of my first impressions was reconciling my own millennial nostalgia for the 90s and for the 2000s, which I think, all trends are cyclical. So we've seen some of those butterfly clips come back in vogue lately, right? But
Did something happen with the sound? It looks like something happened with the sound.
It went past the stopping point that you put in the notes.
Okay, so I'm not really sure why that happened, but I'll keep going. So, book contents. The book, um, I'm going to just talk about how she starts it. She talks about 1999 being the year that she turned 16. And there were three cultural events that she said defined what it meant to be a young woman during this turn in the millennium. In April, Britney Spears appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone, lying on a pink bed, wearing pink panties, a black push-up bra, and she was clutching a Teletubby doll in one hand and a phone in the other. In May, a 60-foot tall naked image of the children's television presenter Gail Porter was projected onto the House of Parliament in London, where fewer than 1 in 5 MPs were women at the time, in a viral caper to promote a men's magazine. And in September, DreamWorks Pictures released American Beauty, a movie in which a middle aged man has recurring sexual fantasies about his teenage daughter's best friend. And the film later won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. So she's kind of setting the stage for what was happening, like starting to happen in the 90s and into the 2000s. And we'll get further into what these images in film and movies, music, even fashion, and how it was influencing a whole generation of girls and women and how like seductive it was. The book contents are that, I usually always talk about the themes of the book. The book contents gets shows the themes. So she has this whole girl on girl. It's like a double entendre. So girl on girl tends to be of a sexual notion, but she's talking about the fact that a lot of the pop culture, the perversion, the way that it was really kind of negative actually turned girls against themselves and each other. So that's the play on words on girl on girl. So girl power, she talks about music and feminism in the 90s. This overexposure culture that started to happen in the 2000s. And then, like, the movies where girls and women started to become like the butt of jokes or overly having their sexuality like overly exaggerated. Then it was like a regression point in the early years of horrible reality TV. Then later on, she gets into Beautiful Girl, the gold mine of impossible expectations, where the look of girls and women, the expectations started to just change. And that's when you had like all these increases in people's feeling like they needed to do plastic surgery. Like I went to college in Long Island, and with a lot of girls who were Jewish from Long Island, and they would. One of my friends told me, "Yep, when I turn 16, we'll get nose jobs. That's part of our Sweet 16 gifts." Final Girl talks about extreme sex, art, and violence, and how post 9/11, the pornography industry exploded, and how it became this real perverse way of viewing women. And there's linkages to that and aggression. Then there's more. So we'll delve more into that. I do have another clip. Can we show this clip now? And hopefully the audio will be in line with what I was aiming for.
Reconciling my own millennial nostalgia for the 90s and for the 2000s, which I think, all trends are cyclical. So we've seen some of those butterfly clips come back in vogue lately, right? But I had this idea of how empowering that period of time was to be coming of age as a young girl and woman in the 90s and 2000s. And reading your book really kind of made me feel like I'd been gaslit that whole time. Like what had been packaged as empowerment was in fact exploitation. And it just didn't align with the era of like girl power that I remembered it as. Can you help me understand like your big thesis around what that era was like for women?
I love the way you phrase this question because it gets at the heart of it, I think, which is for me the reason I wanted to write the book was to figure out why we believed this messaging, like why we were all gaslit in this way, like why it felt so easy to believe that sort of being sexual was empowering, and I think the reason is because it was so fun.
It was so fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was about 13 when the Spice Girls first came out, and I just remember being enthralled to them. Like, they were so fun and they were so gorgeous, and their clothes were so technicolor, and it was so poppy, and it was the aesthetic, the packaging, the music, everything was just delightful. And so sort of it's only coming back in retrospect and seeing things in context that you maybe see them a little bit differently. But definitely, like, I remember just the sort of bubblegum nature of it, how sort of spectacular it was, and how fun, and how much you wanted to be like those women, and to buy the things that would make you feel just like them.
Totally. And that, I think, was key, right? The consumerism as activism is how we were sold and commodified, as the good consumer girls that we were. And so what's the dark side of that? That the light side is this bubblegum pop and girl power era, but what was really going on beneath the surface? I mean, I know that's the whole context of the book, but how would you summarize that sort of darker side to things?
I think there are two things at play. I think one is distraction. And so what was interesting to me in the first chapter of the book, I get into sort of how music is an interesting way to see these different battles in feminism throughout the 90s and see how they play out. And so you have this phrase girl power, which started as a kind of punk riot girl slogan. And it was used by bands like Bikini Kill and their zines. And their zines were very political, and they were ferocious, and they were not bubblegum. They were they were sort of unafraid of being hostile. They were very activist. They advocated for, reproductive rights, and they were very sort of anti-sexual violence. And I think for a lot of girls in that era, this messaging was very thrilling. And this slogan, girl power, was then reclaimed by the Spice Girls in the mid-90s in a very different way. And that, to me, sort of exemplifies the shift between third wave feminism and what we call post-feminism. The Spice Girls are kind of a really interesting exemplar of post-feminism, because it was this movement that developed out of the idea that feminism had achieved everything it would ever achieve or needed to achieve, and that women were now free to do whatever they want, behave exactly like men, get drunk, sleep around, most importantly, shop. I think women had a lot of consumer power toward the end of the 90s. And so in some ways, very smart people in marketing were catching on to this. So you have this shift in what girl power means, and that kind of explains a little bit what's going on in feminism. But then also the idea of girl power as the Spice Girls exemplified it was really about buying things. I mean, they had so many consumer deals. They had something like $1 billion worth of deals by the end of the 90s. They had partnerships with everyone. Like, just name a big brand, the Spice Girls were aligned with them. And in part, this was because marketing gurus had figured out that teenage girls had a lot of money to spend. But the flip side of that was that it really neutralized the messaging. You can't sell things if you have this sort of angry, hostile, activist messaging. I shouldn't call it hostile, because that implies that it wasn't saying important things, and it was. But it's much harder to have those kind of branding deals if you have a sort of ferocious political message like the Riot Girls had. And so that's why girl power, in a sense, became so anodyne and really sort of empty, I think, as a slogan.
Yeah. Well, and I see those two things as so related.
Yeah, so I think I want to delve into that more, and this was educational for me. Um, so as the author was saying, in the early part of the 90s, there was a difference, because those were actually the years that I was becoming a teenager. So this author is older. She's a millennial and I'm a Gen X. And so even when I look she's talking about punk rock, punkers in the UK and in the United States, punk girls. And there was, in the art, there was more of it was more gritty, and it was more about like social commentary, speaking out against the wrongs of society, rape and treating girls bad, and, unequal pay, and even speaking out against things that bothered us, like whether it was apartheid in other places or racism here, but it was messaging and it was pushing up against the establishment, so to speak. But then something started happening where marketing people in these music industries and in these large industries, they wanted to replace those more substantive artists with artists that would be more congenial. There's even a quote in here that one of a very infamous musician said that she heard a record producer, actually record label leader say he would rather just have artists, even if they have less talent, but they were more congenial and likable, he'd rather replace them with it. So this article here that I was looking at, Riot Girl movement gets marginalized to make way for the Spice Girls. I mean, that's my heading, but it talked about the zines, and I didn't know much about it, but they were the ones that coined the whole term girl power. But it had a more substantive meaning. By the time the record execs put the Spice Girls together, they wanted girl power to be about selling things. But yet they made it so fun. They got these cute girls, they dressed them up, and they put this real, and I even started listening. I went back and put the album on. I'll be honest with you, Mel B, they're fly. I never liked their music. I kind of thought it was corny and it was like, I wanna. So I didn't get into it, but there were people that really liked it, the funness of it. And that was the point. You know, they started to like get that change. But it was appropriated from this Riot Girl, which was they were the original people that came up with this girl power movement. By the time it got to the Spice Girls, I was reading, they said girl power means anything. It just means what feels good. And that is where feminism started shifting. So that by the time you had like the Barbie movie, everybody felt like, oh, let's just go watch it because it just feels good. But a lot of things started changing when we were buying into these new meanings of what it meant to be a girl and a woman. And so I really appreciated that piece of the book. Anybody out there? Any comments? I'll stop there a moment.
Not currently.
Okay. All right. I'll keep going. I do have another video that I want to show that talks a little bit more about other subjects of the book and how it impacted how the 90s. And did y'all know the term arts means the 2000s? Arts, AUGHTS. So how the 90s and the arts impacted girls. So can we show that clip? This is from a discussion that occurred on 92nd Street in New York on the book with Amanda Hess, Zoe Haylock, and Anna Marie Tendler.
Explained a lot of the rage that I walk around with on a daily basis.
We will be getting into it. To start, I will start at the beginning of the book. Early on, you cite 3 moments in 1999 when you were 16. One of them is a Britney Spears Rolling Stones profile that's more preoccupied with her body. Another one is the success of the film American Beauty. And the final one is when a nude portrait of a children's TV presenter was projected onto the House of Parliament. I'm curious to start with these, to wonder why they stood out to you to start there in the 90s. And then to you guys, was there a formative moment in your teens where you saw misogyny bright and bold for entertainment?
So I think I came back to these 3 moments because I really remembered the vibe of 1999, and I don't know if you guys too, but it just felt like
kind of techno-utopian, where it just felt like we were on the cusp of this new millennium and everything was so full of potential. And being 16, I was so excited about like being grown up and what it meant and, you know, where my power was. And it was so clear, I think, looking around me in pop culture that power was sexual for women. Like these were just all the messages that we were getting. And I remember sort of mildly being like perturbed by things. Like I think the TV presenter in question was named Gail Porter, and I'd grown up watching her, and she posed for a men's magazine, and then they decided in a marketing stunt without her consent to blast the pictures on the side of the Houses of Parliament, which is where our government sits, obviously. And it just felt like this real affirmation of the idea that like that's where women belonged, not in Parliament, like making decisions and being part of power, but being outside and being sexualized. So I was trying to find memories of mine that also seemed to say something about the era. And these three, for some reason, just really stood out. And American Beauty, my God, I don't know if anyone's rewatched it, but what a movie, guys.
I'm like remembering right now that I saw that movie with my dad.
Oh my God.
Still, it's like whenever do you ever see like a plastic bag floating and you're like, oh my God.
I think for me, like the Britney on the cover of the Rolling Stone is such a seminal moment, and I remember it. But I have to say, when I was that age, and in 1999 going into 2000s, I wasn't registering it as misogyny. I was very much internalizing it and seeing like, oh, she looks amazing. She looks beautiful. Like, I want to be like that. I remember seeing American Beauty and loving it and thinking it was such high art. And it was only as I got older and with hindsight that I really recognized how problematic it was.
The water heater guy is here, and he claims he said he was coming here at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
So you want to just cancel it?
No. Yeah, I'm gonna cancel it.
Okay. Sorry about that. We had a couple of technical issues and we are going to resume our show. Um, we were in the middle of showing a video, I believe.
I can show the 533 clip. Is that good? It's the second half of the same video. Turn your mic on. Turn your mic on.
It's on. Yes, it's fine.
Okay.
That's how problematic it was.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, Britney Spears looms so large in this era, and I really feel like the release of her first single and video like marked the end of my childhood for me. It came out when I was 13, and I have this memory of like listening to the song like blasting on the school bus. And now I'm sort of like, but where was it blasting from? Maybe it was just like it seemed like it was everywhere, but it wasn't. But I just remember having this feeling like knowing that her music was marketed to girls like me, but her body was like being marketed to boys and in fact men, and that being like a very strange moment for me. And then I remember, you know, watching American Beauty, my reaction was, okay, this is a desirable young woman and I'm not her. I remember identifying with the girl who wanted to get plastic surgery, which is that was probably the first time I ever thought about plastic surgery. And I still like, even though I have like no intention of getting it, I watch so many Instagram reels that are like before and afters where I'm like, if I just had $10,000, like what would I do? So I think, you know, in some way that stuff has really stuck with me.
It's so weird about American Beauty too, because they really aestheticize like the creepiness, like the flower petals and the way that she's this kind of eroticized floral centerpiece in the middle of all these roses. It feels like it's kind of defending the creepiness in a way by making it seem artistic. Do you know what I mean?
And what I remember about
Woman
American
and-
Beauty is anybody out there who's seen it, it was all the rage during that year. And many of us felt like, I remember finally seeing it because it was winning all the Oscars. And Kevin Spacey was against Denzel Washington. And Denzel Washington had done an amazing job with Hurricane. And Kevin Spacey ended up winning with this. So I was like, I got to see what was so compelling about it. Now you look back and you say, what was trying to be promoted with movies like that? The other thing that is interesting about what the young lady was saying with how Britney was marketed. On the one hand, you're a, I don't know the age she was, but you have a Teletubby. So you have like this, yeah, it's like a child fantasia. I have a bra on, but I and some panties, so I'm promoting sex, but I got a Teletubby. So that's perversion. And that's what the book really gets into, how much of that culture spread and how it grew all through in fashion and film. And she has a lot of examples of it. And it's something we got to really reflect on. I started noticing vocalists. Part of the reason why some of the vocalists that were becoming very popular about 10 years ago, I didn't feel comfortable hearing them sing because they would be singing these real sexual songs, which is fine to sing sexual, but they would sound like they were 12. So again, it's like it's like you're trying to infantilize women's sexuality. And that is very unhealthy. And that's a big part of what has grown in culture over the last 20 years. And so, yeah, it really talks about there's a quote on Brene Brown's site because she promotes this book and gave it a good review, rather. And one of the quotes she says is, "It's easy to say a music video is just a music video, or a TV show is just a TV show, not to be taken seriously or deeply analyzed. However, pop culture does not exist in a vacuum. It's an ecosystem of messaging that tells us what is valued, what is expected, and what is rewarded in society." So when I was learning that, the Spice Girls was replaced, they replaced the Riot Girls, but they were also set up to sell a lot of products. And it's all of this consumerism that started getting linked with music. So it was less about the artistry of it and how can we make them product placements. And then if you look at even modern times with Instagram influencers, it's the same thing. It's pushing product over artistry. And so they don't really want us speaking out or making art that's counter. They want us looking sexy, young, and when your time is up, your time is up. And then it starts to create these situations where girls and women feel like they have an expiration date at 30. And then after that, they feel like they don't have any worthiness because they feel that their worthiness is just tied to youth culture. So that's something I think we got to really continue to look at and see how it's playing out. Another good um, piece was talking about um, the decade it was crushing for many women who lived through its lens, and how we were spectators of it. And, because it also became about being envious of stars, but then watching them be train wrecks. There's a whole chapter in the book about the 2010s and the train wrecks of all these celebrities. And I had read a book about Whitney Houston, and one of the chapters talked about how much pleasure people got in seeing her in the lowest parts of her life, how her drug addiction was exploited. So all of that was happening over these last 20 years. Women became this commodity. They were either fodder, the butt of jokes. I did an exercise a couple of days ago when I was reading this, and I looked at movies. I thought of movies of the 2010, and I really geared it into Black women. I wanted to zero in on that particular category of women and how negative, how we just were not projected good. And then you had men projecting women. You had your Medeas and your Clumps and your Norbits and all of these different movies and films that were making Black women look unappealing and not on a quality level. All of that happened during this time. We almost could just do without a lot of the quote unquote art of those eras. Another huge theme of this that needs some serious reckoning with is this whole girl boss thing. And the book talked about how hustle culture became glorified. So around the 2008s, right in the backdrop of the Western financial crisis, the banking and housing crises, and people were not well, they were losing money, men were losing a lot of money. This rugged individualism came through. And that was a big part of this quote unquote feminism wave. It wasn't what the original feminism was about, which was more about the good of the collective, somewhat, because that's a there were always groups of women, like Black women, that were left out of feminism, which is why many Black women tend to gravitate to womanism. But even if you look at feminism, by the time it got to the 2000s in this era, it was more about individualism, and it was a heavy message on climbing, striving, and leaning in. Many of you remember the book Lean In that came out by Sheryl Sandberg, who was the COO of Facebook at the time. And her message was, it was like a pull yourself up by your bootstraps for women. It was like, no, we need women getting leaning in. We need them to not want to step away from leadership, but pursue it. But the problem was during that time, there wasn't as much advocacy for the policy and systemic changes that would sustain success, like having not just paid maternity, but there's some countries that have paid paternity leave. I mean, if you want to lean in, but you're also telling women that they should reproduce and have children, their partners need to be set up for success too. And that's where I have a problem with the current wave of feminism, that it's all about just trying to have women dominate men. Well, you're going to look around, and who you're going to have as partners. Again, another reason why I gravitate more to womanism, because womanism is more about not just women, but men and the earth and the planet and stuff. So a lot of this started, it became more about just like competition, a huge emphasis on product selling and lifestyle and branding. And you see shows that it gets into like the Housewives and all of these shows, Blood, Sweat, and Heels. That was one that came out. So a lot of them are like hustle, 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 hustle your way out of poverty, hustle your way out of that student loan debt, or the even if you didn't go to school, you just figure out a way to be an entrepreneur. And there's different ways that they tried it. They tried it through the reality shows. They're doing it now through the Instagram and the TikTok, becoming influencers. But a lot of the messaging is the same. A lot of it is about overconsumption, self improvement to the point where you're like feeling like you're not ever going to be good enough to get out of the impoverished ways. Now what I'm seeing is this language of beauty as currency, and losing weight and self-improvement as currency. And there's nothing wrong with trying to be healthier and be a healthier version of yourself. But you can't beauty currency your way out of unconscious bias and things that may be going on that may prevent certain people from elevating and improving their stance in life. So I think we got to really look at what we've been sold. And that's what I really appreciate about the message of this book. There's a quote that she writes that popular culture is invariably calibrated to male desire, which has ushered in cruelty and disdain towards 51% of the population, particularly if they're not white. Women are told they're never good enough, but better can be bought. Contouring, surgical enhancement, diet selling an idea that can't actually be humanly attained, but can be purchased now with a single click. And that comes from The Guardian. I won't read the whole thing, but it was just a review of the book, How Pop Culture Turned Generation of Women Against Each Other. The book also gets into self-exposure, which is the era we're in, as a commodity. And there's a quote that I found that resonated with me, which was, she said, "It's hard for me not to compare her with Jennifer Ringley, another woman who seemed fascinated by the art and historical significance of her own self-exposure until she realized how little it was given her in return." And the little given her in return is the part that I've sat with, because when Instagram first came out, and now you got TikTok and this and that, Facebook, Meta, we all were almost like really pressured into, everybody has to have a self-exposure. We all have to blog. We all have to be online, creating diaries. These tools serve a place in our lives, but but we were sold this bill of goods that they were going to all make us richer, more successful in the businesses that we had, and more connected. And these tools, now they're being shown that they were benefiting small groups of people. So that's what I mean. Let's stop falling for the okey doke and be more critical about what we accept, the messaging we accept, the products that we are being sold as art. Because a lot of it at the end of the day was to sell, and women were kind of used as marketing tools. And what what made it what created the environment for it was that when the late 80s came aboard, more women were in the workforce. It made people feel like, oh, we're good. The feminism is dead. We don't need it anymore. Let's just focus on getting money, getting educated. We know how we're able to vote now. We've got a few women in office. Let's just move that aside and have fun. So from the 90s to the 2000s to the 2010s to the mid 2020s, it was about like, we don't want to be this rah rah serious. That was the women in the 60s and the 70s, and the Susan B. Anthony's and the Sojourner Troops and the Sister Soldiers. And we want to have fun and be fly and have our stilettos, and we want that more than we want to really feel fight. We don't want that fight. And that created this environment for these movements of exploiting women and then packaging it as empowerment. And it wasn't really empowerment. If you could look back at shows that were like supposedly showing us in a certain way, and it really wasn't hidden. It really wasn't hidden. So I think that is why I really appreciate this book. Some final comments before I move to the second book is, I would like for us to take this time to reflect. I'm going to be doing it. I'm bringing it. That's why I did this episode. I'm hoping other people will read it. It's not a long book. It's like 286 pages, but it is packed with a lot of references to like other things, articles. But even if you just sit back and look at, you go back and you think about like films and movies starting from the 90s and how women were represented. You look at the people who became our role models and idols and what they are pushing and have pushed on girls and women. And then you think about where we are right now in society, what our needs are as girls and women, what we want for our families, what the future is, what the state of the planet is, the state of finances, the wealth gaps. Did it really serve us? Did these movements, really serve us? And how can we get more um, aligned to what we really need? The theme that I heard in a couple of the podcasts that were about this book is people are starting to reflect on how competitive we've been. And that's why, like even when I showed the article about Nikki and Cardi, give it a rest. I mean, what, we can't have, if you are going to say rappers, you can't have 10 female rappers that are successful at the same time. They got to all tear each other down. It has to be Cardi and Nicki and Megan against, Remy against this one. And it's kind of stupid. Like, I mean, you've gotten wealth, you've gotten gaze and fame and fortune. Maybe it's time to just reevaluate how you're using your platform and using it in a responsible way during this time. More on collectivism and collaboration versus competition, and getting more civically, politically, and conscious expanding. Because, it's a reckoning happening right now. We got to look and see. So, in terms of ratings, I give it 4 stars because it was well researched. And I think it's a reflective and conversation starter that's needed in the culture right now, the culture of women. And and men who care, And I think there's room for a part two. So I thank Sophia for, taking the time to put that book together. Any comments out there before I move on?
Not as of now.
Okay. So now I'll move to another book that just, as I was listening, thinking about the book, I thought about No Disrespect. Because, like I said, in the early part of the 90s, we did have a different type of culture when it came to girls and women, even the way that, like, I just think about the way that I dressed in high school, the style, and how it was just more about like kind of being modest, having like that modest beauty. And I notice a lot of people like to say 90s fine, but part of that 90s fine was it wasn't an over exaggeration. Yeah, we had our MAC makeup and stuff, but it was a little more natural and a little more modest, but it was just jazzy and that individual beauty. Everyone didn't have to graft their faces and their bodies to look exactly the same. And we don't have to do that now. So, but it was also like you could speak your mind. I was listening to Black Rain by Queen Latifah earlier today, and it was artists. I consider like the way Queen Latifah's album was light. That was something. It was similar to what might have been like punk, but it was in hip hop. They're talking about anti-violence, anti-disrespect, but also inviting love in and being in charge and being powerful. So you had that, but over time it started to change and the message got weakened. So here you got Sister Soldier. She wrote this book, No Disrespect, and it helped to shape me because I was in high school the year that it came out. So here's an author profile. Her She is 61 years old now. Can you believe that? Lisa Williamson, she was the author. She got her education from Rutgers. She was really into like political education and community organizing. She got involved with like Public Enemy, and then something really serious happened in the 90s. This book, I'm sorry, there was this great article in The Nation, and it was talking about how Sister Soldier went from radical activist to scapegoat because she was very outspoken against police brutality, poverty, a lot of the issues that Black Americans were facing, and she was very bold. And that's what I mean. There were women that had that boldness, and they were speaking out against the wrongs that was still happening. And around the time that Bill Clinton was running for office, he used her as a scapegoat and likened her message to the KKK, and it caused a whole ruckus. And he was able to get um, enough from downplaying a Black woman. He was able to get enough white people to like him, but still, because he played the saxophone and had that Southern vibe, a lot of Black people liked him, and he ended up getting elected. But Sister Soldier, she shifted then to becoming a writer and wrote a lot of successful books, and she's still writing to this day. And I saw this quote from the article, and it says, in the novel, she appears. Now, this is talking about the fabulous, The Coldest Winter Ever. She says the reason why The Coldest Winter Ever started off with Winter Santiago saying she hates Sister Soldier was so that I could distinguish her voice, her life, her experiences from my own. I thought that was a metaphor for real life anyway, because the popular people are like pop culture. They like mainstream, and the activist person is like someone who either gets ignored or aggravates people because she reminds them of what we all should be responsible for. So that I specifically pulled that quote out because it relates to what the first book that I covered earlier was, which was that pop, you need to have those that balanced voice. And I think that's part of the problem now. I'm not anti-fun, but there's no balance. There's all these weird exaggerated depictions of women and not enough of that groundedness. And I think that's why we're in such a perverse time. So getting back to no disrespect. So I remember this book. I was trying to pull it out because I have it like dug in my shelves, but I just really enjoyed reading it because she is such a balance of like keeping it real and providing a lot of really good information. Like this review was great. It said that she's a notorious hip hop rebel. It's a candid book, how young Black girls grow up with their integrity intact in a very tough world. It's gripping, searing account of ferocious struggle for sexual identity and autonomy and confronts Black women. She reveals herself to be a writer. She has Nathan, Mona, Joseph. It's a brutally honest account of the rage and hopes of girls in the ghetto. It's filled with memorable scenes and unforgettable characters. And that's how the book is written. I'll show contents themes, young Black girlhood into womanhood, overcoming poverty. She talks about her life growing up with her mother and then them moving into the projects and education. But each of the book is are chapters with people. I love that because think about how much of our life is shaped by the people that come into our life. So, like Nathan, one of them is her boyfriend. Is a guy who is, he ends up having an affair on her, and he's questioning his sexuality. So that was eye opening for me to read as a young woman. There's a really great chapter on Nikki, who was a totally different girl from her. She was more sophisticated. They met in college, and Nikki had would date older men, and I remember her taking Sister Soldier with her to a restaurant with this older businessman that was wining and dining them. And then it may come off a little superficial, but then Nikki would go and take all of her clothes and donate it to the homeless shelter. So I was seeing like this example of how whole a girl or woman could be and not just be all about the superficial, but also maybe genuinely want to elevate themselves and overcome. I really loved it. Consciousness is in it, friendship is in it, and it is very gritty, and it was written way before The Coldest Winter Ever, which is fiction, and this is more of like half memoir and talking about the different people in her life. So I think it's still a good book for young girls and young women to read. I wonder how some of the topics might be, I don't know, maybe they will be dated because, we're in such a different world with technology and things like that. But there's still a lot of stuff that girls and women go through that I think they could gain from reading this book. So I have a clip
Hold
that
on, before you go any further, I
okay.
wanted to talk about Sister Soldier's pen game. Her pen game is furious. And I was pleasantly surprised when I got into the Midnight and Love um, series. And when I got into the Midnight and Love series, it was a lot about like her books were so good that I thought that they could rival with the James Patterson action novels and the James Patterson um, kind of action series that he provides. Midnight in Love, I think it's about maybe 5 novels that she wrote about Midnight in Love. Even her latest one is really, really dope. I only got to get halfway through it. But I'm telling you, if you want a great mixture of the Black experience intertwined with adventure espionage, and a little kink, appropriate kink. You know what I mean? I like the book. I like Midnight in Love series, and I was pleasantly surprised at how good of a fiction writer she was. Really good.
Yeah, I like Midnight. Some of her books, like The Coldest Winter, was so that's a classic in urban fiction, and then a couple of them one after that weren't as done as well, and some people are really uh I was really kind of disappointed in some of the quality of some of the other books. It was really kind of surprising. But then I read Love After Midnight last year, and I did enjoy that one. So and in Midnight, like she says, people all over the world come to try to find her, and they think midnight is real. So but yeah, I have really a lot of I know that she also has a population of people that really read these books. She said a lot of people incarcerated and everyday people just really get into a lot of her books. So I'm glad she was able to move into another direction with her books after, pivoting. And that's part of what a lot of people who get into hip hop may need to do, is figure out how else they can use their all the knowledge and talent they have. What other form and other medium can they put it in? But I gave this 5 stars because it's impactful, it's bold, it's honest, it's relatable, and thought provoking.
Do you want to show the last bit?
Yeah. So the last bit is I came across, there wasn't a ton of, I like to, infuse other people's videos and and if it's a podcast on the book into the show. And because this book is older, there weren't a lot of clips on it. But I did come across a young lady out of North Carolina who has a page who did some reading on a section of it. So I was going to share that here on the show.
Can you remind me of the timestamp for that?
Yes. So this comes from Morgan Myers, and she's reading the intro note to readers. And it starts at the 5 minute and 40 second start,
Okay.
because it's a pretty long video, but we don't have to show all of that. I just wanted to show a little bit of the intro to note readers.
Okay.
I was an angel, nor am I innocent or holy like the Virgin Mary. What I am is natural and serious and as sensitive as an open nerve on an ice cube. I'm a young black sister with an unselfish heart who overdosed on love long ago. My closest friends consider me soft spoken. Others say I have a deadly tongue. And while it's true that I have a spicy attitude like most of the ghetto girls I know, I back it up with a quick, precise, and knowledgeable mind. See, so many of us just be wanting to run our mouth and be smart, have attitude, don't know nothing. You gotta have a quick mind to back that smart mouth up, honey. My memory runs way back, and I'm inclined to remind people of the things they like most to forget. My brothers and sisters born into the confusion of North America, who emerge into positions of leadership, do so less because we're saints in the purported European sense, and more so because we have an intense ability to feel in the African sense. We feel not only for ourselves, but for the entire African family. This is true. I want to share a story, not for accolades, but to piggyback on that. I was thinking, like, if we live more village minded and more communally as a melanated people, we would get so much further along in life. Like, I had a homegirl the other day. She had an issue going on with her tire. I had the free time to go help and assist. I had to pick up her brother and help them find a tire location, all this and that. And we found one, and she's like, "Well, how are we gonna pay for the tire?" And I'm like, "All right, I got you." So, because I've had my tire blown out on me before in a whole nother city. I've had to like get whole lug nuts repaired. I've had, situations in my life where people have really come to my rescue and really invested in me. And so I was $30. So I, made sure she got the tire. She was good. She was squared away. And when I thought about it, I've been thinking on it the past few days. I'm like, one, I'm blessed that I had the ability to be able to do that. But two, like, I felt like it was my car. Like, I don't want to see my sister with her flat tire, and her brother both are using a car and have kids that they need to transport. And I just felt like that's what village mindedness is. Like, I truly live and think that way. And I think that if we all did, we would be less selfish, we would be less consumed with our own worries and drama, and we'd be able to be accessible and available for others when we need help. It wouldn't be such a big deal. So that part just reminded me of that. We feel not only for ourselves, but for our African family. We feel our people's pains, their torture, their joy, and their happiness. We feel the spirit of our ancestors who challenge us to be more than what white society gives us as standards and limitations. So everything I believe is said to be extreme. Yet none of my critics can deny that conditions for African people in America and throughout the world are extreme. No matter how backward and negative the mainstream view and image of black people, I feel compelled to reshape that image and explore our many positive angles because I love my own people. Perhaps this is because I've been blessed with spiritual African eyes at a time when most Africans have had their eyes poked out. I see the beauty and talent in my people in all areas of life. Our potential is infinite. I humbly thank God for this vision because I've seen African people, young and old, overlook themselves for the span of a lifetime. I've seen beautiful, original, deep tar men whose appearance and spirit resonate with and represent the power of God feel small in the presence of frail, pale, spiritual midgets. I've seen big-eyed, hyperactive black children sit side by side in classrooms with white children who felt superior because they had a greater ability to sit still. Meanwhile, the African child had a greater amount of energy that, if loved and shaped, could have led this European world out of its cold, twisted, and bellicose behavior. So, like most
So
ghetto
we can
girls who
stop
haven't yet
there,
turned into money-hungry, heartless
Producer.
bitches by
So yeah, pick up that book. No disrespect, because I mean, think about it. Even in that was just the note to readers. That wasn't even her talking about the chapter, and it's relevant. Like a lot of the stuff she's saying in the wake of everything that's happening right now, we do need to be built up. And I love what this young lady said, Morgan Myers, about village minded. Which is all about community. So it's a common theme in both of these books, two very different books from two different eras. One is ushered, the beginning, mid 90s, and she's trying to help tell the girls and women who would read this how, based on her life, uh, we could think and be cautious. And then the other is taking a look at the last 30 years and how women's views have been shaped and contorted, and the imagery we are getting and the imagery that our 12-year-olds are getting now, and how unhealthy that is, and what do we do about it. And so both of these are great books to read, great resources for that. So out in there, I'm probably going to do some cleanup because we had quite a few interruptions with this episode before we post it. And then when we post it out there in the ether, please like it and share it. Check these books out. Share with people that you have book clubs that you may know that just like literature. And let's keep this conversation going. Thank you. Peace.